My old teachers spent an hour humiliating me for dropping out of high school, not knowing I left to run a $10 million company. I was nervous to go back to my old high school, but there was no way I was going to miss my little sister's academic award ceremony. I'd dropped out sophomore year when my app exploded and investors started offering me money, but I never told anyone back home because my former bullies don't deserve to know about my success. When I saw my old teachers near the punch bowl, I tried to stay invisible, but my history teacher spotted me immediately, and her face twisted with disgust. Well, well, look who decided to show her face, she announced loudly enough for other parents to hear. The dropout returns. I hope you're not here asking for your transcript because that ship has sailed. Some mistakes can't be undone. She looked me up and down with disgust. Still dressing like a teenager, I see. That's what happens when you don't finish growing up properly. I smiled and said I was just here for my sister, but that made her angrier. My old math teacher joined in immediately. Your poor sister, having to carry the burden of your failure. She's probably working twice as hard to make up for the shame you brought on your family. He shook his head dramatically. I remember when you had potential. Now look at you. Probably still living in your parents' basement, mooching off them while your sister actually accomplishes something. The English teacher grabbed my arm when I tried to walk away. Don't you dare run from this conversation like you ran from your education. You need to hear this. She squeezed harder, her nails digging in. Every time I see a homeless person, I think of my former students who dropped out. That'll be you soon if it isn't already. What do you even do all day? Play video games while your sister studies? When I mentioned I was doing well, the math teacher laughed so hard he spilled his coffee. Doing well? What's that mean? You got a job at McDonald's? Maybe made shift manager? He turned to the growing crowd of teachers. This is what we mean when we talk about wasted potential. She thought she was too good for school, and now she's probably on food stamps. The principal arrived and joined the pile on. I heard you were back. Security almost didn't let you in because you're not a student or graduate. He addressed the other teachers and said, this is what failure looks like. She threw away her future for what? Probably got pregnant or involved with doctors. That's usually why girls drop out. The history teacher grabbed my phone when it buzzed with a work notification. Let's see what's so important. Probably your dealer or your baby daddy. She read the screen and laughed. CEO? Is that what you call your boyfriend? How pathetic. Making up titles to feel important. She threw my phone on the ground, the screen cracking. Oops, but you can't afford a new one anyway. The math teacher decided to make an announcement to the whole reception. Parents, let this be a lesson. This former student dropped out thinking she knew better than us. Now she crashes events to feel connected to success she'll never have. Your children could end up like her if they don't value education. He pointed at me like I was an exhibit. Failure has a face and it's standing right there. The English teacher pulled out scissors from her desk drawer nearby. You know what? Your hair is as messy as your life. Let me fix something about you. She actually grabbed my hair and cut off a chunk before I could pull away. There, now your outside matches your inside. Broken and worthless. Other teachers laughed and applauded. The history teacher poured her entire cup of red punch over my head, the sticky liquid running down my face and staining my blazer. You smell like failure anyway. Might as well look like it too. This is what dropouts deserve. She then slapped me across the face, hard. That's for wasting my time trying to educate you. I should send your parents a bill for all the resources you stole from deserving students. The crowd of teachers cheered. The principal grabbed my wrist and started dragging me toward the exit. You're traumatizing the successful students with your presence. Get out before you infect them with your failure. When I resisted, he twisted my arm behind my back. Should I call the police? Trespassing is a crime. Your sister will be so humiliated when you're arrested at her ceremony. The math teacher added one final insult as they surrounded me. The saddest part is you probably tell yourself you made the right choice. But everyone here knows you're a cautionary tale, a waste of oxygen who threw away her only chance at a real life. Your sister must be so ashamed to share DNA with you. I bet she tells people you died rather than admit you're a dropout loser. That's when my sister appeared, fresh from taking photos with her award, and saw me surrounded by teachers with punch dripping from my hair and a chunk of it missing. What the hell is going on here? She pushed through them and grabbed my hand, taking in my destroyed appearance. Why don't you tell them the truth about what you've been doing since you left? Tell them about your company. The teachers all stared at me, barely breathing. I felt the sticky punch dripping from my hair onto the gym floor while everyone waited for me to speak. My sister squeezed my hand so hard it hurt, but I just looked at the teachers and said we should probably talk somewhere more private. The last thing I wanted was to make my sister's special day even worse than it already was. The history teacher let out this nasty laugh while the math teacher rolled his eyes like I was wasting their time. I turned toward the exit with my sister still holding my hand and started walking even though they were calling after us to come back and explain myself. My hands shook as I bent down to pick up my cracked phone from where the history teacher had thrown it. The screen was spiderwebbed across the whole surface and barely responding to my touch. My sister grabbed the chunk of hair the English teacher had cut off and shoved it in her pocket, while giving them all the dirtiest look I'd ever seen on her face. Several parents had their phones out taking pictures or videos of us leaving, and I realized I must look like someone who'd been attacked. The punch had soaked through my blazer and was making my white shirt underneath turn pink. We pushed through the gym doors into the parking lot where my sister basically dragged me to her car. She helped me into the passenger seat, then got in and locked the doors before turning to me with this look of total shock. She demanded to know what the hell was going on and what I'd been doing since I dropped out. I took a deep breath and told her the truth about everything. My company was worth $10 million, and I had 23 employees working for me. I'd been featured in Tech Weekly twice in the last year alone. She sat there with her mouth open, just staring at me like I'd grown a second head. She asked why I never told anyone, and I explained that I wanted to protect our family from people who would suddenly want things from us if they knew. Plus, my old bullies didn't deserve to know about my success after how they treated me. She started the car and said we were going to urgent care right away to document everything those teachers did to me. The drive only took 15 minutes, but my face was throbbing where the history teacher had slapped me. When we walked into urgent care, the receptionist took one look at me and asked if I needed to call the police. My sister told her we would be doing that, but first we needed medical documentation of the injuries. The triage nurse came out immediately and brought us back to an exam room. She took photos of the mark on my face and found that my scalp was actually bleeding where the teacher had yanked my hair before cutting it. She gave me paperwork about assault documentation and looked really concerned when I explained that teachers at the high school had done this to me. She said teachers aren't supposed to put their hands on anyone whether they're a current student or not. While waiting for the doctor to come check me out, I pulled out my cracked phone and called the non-emergency police line. The officer on the phone took down all the basic information and gave me a report number. He said a detective would follow up within 48 hours about potentially pressing charges. My sister held my hand through the whole call and kept saying she couldn't believe this was even necessary. The doctor came in and cleaned the wound on my scalp, then put some antibiotic ointment on it. He said the slap mark would probably bruise and I should ice it when I got home. He also documented everything in my medical record and said he'd seen bar fights that looked better than what happened to me. We left urgent care with a folder full of documentation and photos of my injuries. My sister drove me home and our parents were already asleep since it was past 11 at night. I went to my room and finally called Jamal Baker, who was my operations lead at the company. He also handled any PR crises that came up, though we'd never had anything like this before. He listened to the whole story without interrupting once, even though I could hear him typing notes the entire time. When I finished, he immediately went into damage control mode, asking about witnesses and evidence. He was really worried about how this could affect our upcoming Series B funding round if the story went viral. He said he knew someone who could help and would connect us first thing in the morning. Before I could even ask who he meant, he said her name was Paula Robinson, and she specialized in education law and civil cases. He'd already texted her assistant to set up an emergency consultation for the next morning at 8. He told me to document absolutely everything and save any videos parents might have taken, but not to post anything on social media yet. After we hung up, an email came through with intake forms from Paula's office. I sat at my desk filling them out until 2 in the morning, trying to remember every single detail of what each teacher had said and done. Before going to bed, I knocked on my sister's door to check in with her about everything. She was still awake and let me sit on her bed while we talked. I told her I didn't want this situation to overshadow her achievement, because she'd worked so hard for that award. She said she didn't care about the award anymore and just wanted justice for what they did to me. I promised her we would handle this the right way, without letting it define her whole high school experience. The next morning, my alarm went off at 6:30, and I got ready to meet Paula at her downtown office. My sister insisted on driving me even though she should have been at the school. Paula's office was on the 10th floor of this fancy building, and her assistant brought us right into a conference room. Paula came in carrying a legal pad and coffee, and got straight to business reviewing all my options. We could file criminal charges for assault and battery based on the physical attacks. We could also file a civil lawsuit against the teachers and potentially the district. There were complaints we could file through the school district's formal process. She also mentioned requesting restraining orders against each teacher who had touched me. She explained that having multiple teachers involved actually made the case stronger, because it showed systematic harassment rather than one bad apple. We decided to pursue all avenues at the same time to maximize pressure on the district to take this seriously. Paula had me call Helena Lauer at the superintendent's office right there from her conference room to file the formal complaint. Helena scheduled a meeting for that afternoon at 2, and explained that the district took assault allegations very seriously, especially with multiple witnesses. She sounded genuinely concerned but also really careful about liability, and kept using words like allegedly and potentially. When the meeting ended, I drove straight home and plugged in my cracked phone to back everything up before it died completely. The CEO notification from earlier was still there on the lock screen, and I took screenshots of it from every angle. Paula had told me to save anything that showed my real job title since the teachers kept saying I was lying about having a company. I pulled up my laptop and started downloading every document I could find about my business. The incorporation papers from Delaware showed my name as founder and CEO clear as day. I found 3 articles from Tech Weekly that mentioned our latest funding round and saved those too. My hands were still shaking from the meeting with Helena, but I forced myself to keep working. I printed everything out and made copies for Paula's files. My sister came into my room holding her phone and showed me a list of names she'd been collecting all afternoon. Parents from the ceremony had been texting her nonstop asking if I was okay and offering to help. One woman who worked as a nurse had already written up notes about the visible injuries she saw on my face and arm. My sister had their phone numbers and email addresses organized in a spreadsheet. She said at least 12 parents wanted to give statements about what they saw. I forwarded everything to Paula right away. The next morning, I tried to get the security footage from the school, but the secretary said I needed to file a formal request. She handed me a packet of forms that made no sense with all the legal terms. I called Paula's office, and her assistant walked me through filling out the FOIA request properly. She warned me the district might say the cameras weren't working or the footage got deleted, but we needed to try anyway. I drove back to the school and submitted the paperwork, getting a receipt that proved I'd filed it. The meeting with Helena had gone better than I expected, even though she kept being careful with her words. She took notes the whole time I talked and asked specific questions about who did what. When I showed her the photos from urgent care of my injuries, her face went pale. She said she needed to place the 3 teachers on leave right away while they investigated. She promised this would be taken seriously, but also mentioned the teachers' union would probably fight back hard. Paula spent the rest of that day writing formal complaint letters about each teacher. She had me go through everything again to make sure we got the details right. The history teacher's letter described the punch pouring and the slap. The English teacher's letter focused on the hair cutting with scissors. The math teacher's letter detailed the public humiliation and the announcement he made. The principal got his own letter about the threats and twisting my arm. Paula said the union would look for any tiny mistake, so we had to be perfect. That night, my sister knocked on my door and sat on my bed looking upset. She said kids at the school were asking her about what happened, and she felt like it was her fault for having the ceremony. I told her the teachers made their own choices, and she was brave for standing up for me. She started crying and said she couldn't focus on her classes. We looked up therapists who took our insurance and found one who could see us together next week. The next morning, I went to a salon to deal with my destroyed hair. The stylist gasped when she saw the chunk missing from where the English teacher had cut it. I explained what happened, and she took photos from every angle for my records. She spent 2 hours trying to make it look normal, but ended up having to cut it into a short pixie style. She refused to let me pay and said teachers should help kids not hurt them. Every time I looked in the mirror now, I remembered the scissors and the laughing. That evening, my phone buzzed with a text from Jamal showing me a screenshot from social media. One of the teachers had posted about entitled former students who can't handle truth without using my name. Jamal was already documenting everything and said we needed to be ready in case my identity got out. We spent an hour writing a statement we could use if reporters started calling, but hoped we wouldn't need it. Jamal set up a conference call with our board of directors for the next morning to tell them what was happening. He said they needed to hear it from us before it showed up online somewhere. During the call, the board members were supportive, but worried about how this might affect our next funding round. I promised we were handling everything through lawyers and not looking for media attention. They agreed to wait and see how things played out, but I could tell they were nervous. After the call, I sat at my computer and started writing down everything that happened in my own words. Paula had said not to release anything publicly yet, but I wanted to have it ready. She explained that keeping quiet now might get us a better settlement later since the district wouldn't feel pressured by bad publicity. I saved the document, but it killed me to stay silent when they'd humiliated me in front of everyone. 2 days later, my phone rang while I was checking emails, and the detective's name showed up on my cracked screen. He said the teachers were now claiming I'd been disruptive and they were just escorting me out peacefully. I grabbed the folder Paula had me prepare and read him every witness name and phone number while he typed. He asked about the medical records, and I told him about the scalp bleeding and the mark on my face. When I mentioned 3 different teachers had physically touched me, he got quiet and said that changed things. He said the evidence clearly showed assault even if they claimed they were just removing me. I heard him typing more, and he said he'd be interviewing the witnesses this week. After we hung up, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. A parent from the ceremony had attached a video file saying she thought I might need this. My hands shook as I opened it, and there was the English teacher grabbing my hair with the scissors. The video showed her cutting the chunk off while other teachers laughed. Then it showed the history teacher pouring the entire cup of punch over my head. The slap wasn't visible, but you could hear the sharp sound and see my head snap to the side. I immediately forwarded it to Paula, who called within minutes. She said this was exactly what we needed to prove they were lying about peaceful removal. She told me to save it in 3 different places and make sure I had backups. Right after that call, my work phone started going crazy with messages from my team. Our main server had crashed right in the middle of a huge client demo. I had to push everything about the assault out of my mind and focus. I jumped on a video call and could see my team panicking in the conference room. The client was still there waiting while we scrambled to get the backup server running. I walked them through the recovery process step by step while trying to keep my voice calm. My lead developer found the problem, and we got the demo back up in 12 minutes. The client actually said they were impressed with how we handled the crisis. We ended up closing the deal for $300,000. After the demo, I sat with my sister in her room to practice what she should say at the school. Kids had been asking her nonstop about what happened at the ceremony. Some teachers were being weird with her too, either extra nice or kind of cold. We came up with simple responses that didn't give details but didn't lie either. She could say it was handled by lawyers and she couldn't discuss it. If teachers pushed, She should go to the counselor immediately. We practiced until she felt comfortable with each response. That same evening, my phone lit up with messages from parents at the ceremony. The school had sent out an email to all families about an incident under review. The email didn't say what happened or name anyone involved. Parents who saw everything were posting on the school's Facebook page describing the assault. One mom wrote a long post about watching teachers pour punch on a former student. Another parent commented that they saw a teacher cut someone's hair with scissors. The posts were getting dozens of angry reactions and comments. People were tagging the school board demanding answers. The next morning, Helena called from the superintendent's office with an update. The 3 teachers had been placed on paid administrative leave pending investigation. The principal got a formal reprimand but was still working. She sounded tired and said the union was already fighting the suspensions hard. She mentioned this was becoming a real situation for the district. The board was getting calls and emails from angry parents. She said they were taking it seriously but had to follow proper procedures. 2 hours later, Paula forwarded me a letter from the teachers' union lawyer. They claimed the allegations were exaggerated and that I'd been trespassing at the event. They said I was acting aggressively, and the teachers were just protecting other attendees. Paula had already drafted our response with the medical records attached. She included witness statements from 5 parents who saw everything. She warned me the union would fight to protect the teachers no matter what they did. That afternoon, I got an email from someone named Talia Meredith, identifying herself as an education reporter. She said parents had contacted her about the incident and she wanted my side. She offered to keep my name and company anonymous if I talked to her. I forwarded it to Jamal immediately, and we got on a call to discuss it. He thought media attention might help pressure the district but could also hurt my company. We went back and forth about the risks of my identity getting out. After an hour of debate, we called Paula to get her opinion on the media situation. She said staying quiet was better for the legal case right now. Any public statements could be used against us in proceedings. Jamal started working on a crisis plan just in case my identity leaked anyway. He wrote talking points that focused only on the assault, not my success. We wanted to control the story if it became necessary to go public. 3 days after the assault, I finally went to my first therapy appointment. The therapist had me describe everything that happened in detail. When I got to the part about the scissors, I started shaking. She helped me recognize that being successful didn't make the attack less traumatic. She taught me breathing exercises for when I smelled fruit punch or saw scissors. She said the teachers had violated a fundamental trust when they attacked me. We scheduled weekly sessions to work through the anger and humiliation I was carrying. 2 days later, Paula called to tell me the school board had scheduled a special meeting about the incident, and I could make a public comment if I wanted. She came to my apartment that afternoon with a legal pad, and we spent 3 hours writing out exactly what happened, sticking to facts without any emotional language that could hurt our case. I practiced reading it over and over in front of my bathroom mirror, trying not to let my voice shake when I got to the part about the scissors. Paula made me do it 20 times until I could get through it without my hands trembling. The morning of the board meeting, my sister drove me there early, and we sat in the parking lot while I went through my breathing exercises. The room was already packed when we walked in, and I saw the 3 teachers sitting in the back corner with someone in a suit who had to be their union rep. I took my seat at the podium when they called for public comments and read my statement slowly and clearly, describing the punch being poured, the scissors cutting my hair, the slap across my face, and the public humiliation in front of dozens of witnesses. Several parents in the audience were nodding along, and I recognized a few from the ceremony. The board members kept their faces blank, but one of them was taking notes and another kept glancing at the teachers. When I finished and sat down, the teacher's lawyer stood up immediately and said I had provoked the whole thing by refusing to leave when asked, and that the teachers were just protecting other students from disruption. My whole body tensed up and I wanted to scream that being asked to leave doesn't give anyone the right to assault someone. But Paula grabbed my arm under the table and squeezed hard, reminding me to stay quiet and let the evidence do the talking. Helena got up next and announced the district was bringing in an outside investigator to review everything and interview all the witnesses over the next 6 weeks. The teachers' union rep jumped up and objected, saying the investigator they picked had a history of bias against educators and demanded someone else. Helena said the decision was final, and the investigation would be transparent with findings made public. The next morning, I drove to my sister's school and met quietly with her counselor to make sure no teachers were giving her a hard time about my complaint. The counselor said she'd been watching carefully and would document anything concerning, but so far my sister was handling things well, even though she seemed anxious. My sister had told her that some kids were asking questions, but she just said it was a family matter and changed the subject. That afternoon, Jamal forwarded me a link that made my blood boil. The teachers' supporters had created a fundraising page calling them victims of a vindictive former student with an agenda who was trying to destroy their careers. They'd already raised $2,000 for legal fees in just 6 hours. Paula said to let it go because it actually helped our case by showing they weren't taking any responsibility for what they did. Jamal said he'd monitor it for anything that crossed the line into defamation about me or my company. Paula filed paperwork the next day for a temporary restraining order to keep the teachers from contacting me or coming within 500 feet. The judge approved it based on the medical records and assault documentation, and the order got served to all 3 teachers at the school. Not even 24 hours later, my old school email that forwards to my personal account got a message from the math teacher asking if we could talk and work this out without lawyers. Paula immediately filed a contempt motion for violating the restraining order and said this showed they didn't respect boundaries or court orders. Meanwhile, Jamal insisted we do media training in case my identity leaked, and reporters started calling. We spent an entire afternoon in his office with him pretending to be a hostile interviewer, while I practiced staying calm and sticking to facts about seeking accountability for assault, not revenge or money. He kept reminding me that every word I said could affect both the legal case and our company's reputation with investors. Over the next 2 weeks, Paula got copies of sworn statements from 8 different parents who saw what happened at the ceremony. One mother wrote that she was so shocked by the teacher's behavior, she couldn't believe educated professionals would act that way toward anyone, especially a former student. Another parent described seeing the English teacher with the scissors and hearing the slap from across the room. The investigator called Paula after reviewing everything and said the evidence was overwhelming and consistent across all witnesses. 3 weeks into the investigation, the detective who took my original police report called with an update. The district attorney's office had decided to file misdemeanor battery charges against the history teacher for the slap, since it was captured on video and witnessed by so many people. The other 2 teachers would only face administrative consequences through the school district, which felt unfair, but the detective said having video evidence of the slap made that charge easier to prove in court. He said the history teacher would get a summons to appear in court next month and would likely plea bargain for probation and anger management classes rather than risk a trial with so much evidence against her. 2 days later, Paula called me while I was reviewing code at my office and said the district's legal counsel wanted to discuss a potential settlement through mediation instead of going to trial. She explained they were suddenly willing to revise all their policies about physical contact with visitors and mandate training for every staff member in the district. Paula sounded excited and told me they were taking this way more seriously now that criminal charges were filed against the history teacher. I asked her what kind of settlement amount they were offering, but she said we hadn't gotten to numbers yet because I needed to decide what I actually wanted from this whole mess. That night, I stayed up thinking about what would actually make a difference instead of just getting money for myself. The next morning, I called Paula with an idea that had been forming in my head all night. I wanted any financial settlement to go toward creating a scholarship for students who succeed outside the normal academic path, kids who might be entrepreneurs or artists or inventors, but don't fit the traditional mold. Paula loved the idea and said it would make the district look better too, since they could spin it as creating something positive from the situation. When I told my sister about it at lunch, she got really excited and suggested we name it after our grandmother, who never finished high school but built her own successful bakery business back in the 60s. After going back and forth with Paula for 3 days and looking at all my options, I decided to pursue the mediated settlement with specific conditions that the teachers had to complete training, give real apologies, and the district had to update their policies and fund the scholarship with at least $50,000. Paula said it was a mature choice that would help future students more than just punishing the teachers would. The mediation started smoothly until the union's lawyer jumped in and said the teachers couldn't admit any wrongdoing in their apologies because it would affect their careers and make them vulnerable to more lawsuits. Paula pushed back hard and argued that assault victims deserve acknowledgement of the harm done to them, not some watered-down statement that avoided responsibility. We spent 3 whole days going back and forth on the exact wording, with the union lawyer rejecting every version that included words like wrong or inappropriate or assault, while Paula kept insisting on real accountability. On the 4th day of negotiations, Paula called me with surprising news that the math teacher had requested a separate restorative justice meeting with me outside the main mediation, with both our lawyers present, of course. She said he wanted to explain his side and apologize directly, which the union wasn't happy about but couldn't stop him from doing. I agreed to meet him the following week at Paula's office, though I made it clear I wasn't promising to forgive him or drop anything based on what he said. The meeting was awkward from the start, with the math teacher looking older and more tired than I remembered from the ceremony. He explained he'd been dealing with burnout for years and had taken his frustration about the education system out on me, which he said didn't excuse what he did but helped explain why he'd been so cruel. I listened without interrupting while he talked about feeling like a failure himself after 30 years of teaching and watching so many students struggle. He apologized for the public humiliation and admitted he was wrong to make assumptions about my life and success without knowing anything about what I'd actually accomplished. I accepted his apology, but made it clear that words couldn't undo the harm, especially since he'd announced to a room full of parents that I was a failure and waste of oxygen. He nodded and said he understood, then asked if there was anything he could do to make it right beyond the formal requirements. I told him to be better to his current students and never make another kid feel worthless for choosing a different path. Meanwhile, Helena called Paula with news that the principal had agreed to transition to a non-student-facing role in the district office as part of the settlement, meaning he wouldn't be disciplining or interacting with students anymore. Helena mentioned he was actually relieved to step back from direct student contact after this whole incident had blown up so publicly. It felt like appropriate accountability, even if he wasn't getting fired completely. The history and English teachers ended up receiving mandated training on appropriate conduct, plus supervision requirements and evaluation periods that could lead to termination if they had any other incidents with students or visitors. Paula explained it wasn't the same as firing them, but it put them on notice and created a paper trail that would follow them. The union finally agreed to these terms rather than risk worse consequences if we went to trial with all our evidence. The scholarship got established with the settlement funds about 2 weeks later, set up initially as an anonymous donation, though I planned to reveal myself as the donor eventually when the time felt right. My sister got appointed to the selection committee for choosing the first recipient this spring, which made her really proud to be part of creating something good from something so awful. The paperwork specified it would support students pursuing non-traditional paths to success, exactly what I'd wanted. After everything was signed and settled, my family organized a private dinner at my parents' house to properly celebrate my sister's academic achievement that had gotten completely overshadowed by the assault and its aftermath. She stood up during dessert and gave this speech about how proud she was of me for standing up for myself and using my success to help other kids who might not fit the traditional mold. Our parents got emotional and my mom started crying, finally understanding why I'd kept my company secret for so long and apologizing for not protecting me better at the ceremony. 3 days later, the local paper ran a story about the district changing their visitor policies, but my name stayed out of it completely. Jamal texted me relief emojis when he saw the article focused on policy reform, instead of mentioning our company or the assault details. The reporter who'd reached out to me earlier published her piece without naming me or describing the specific incident, just noting that a visitor had been physically assaulted by staff members. Our Series B funding round closed the next week without any investors even knowing about what happened at the school. Jamal had prepared this whole crisis management plan with talking points and media strategies, but we never needed to use any of it. The paperwork for my phone damage claim arrived from the district's insurance company, and I filled it out while sitting in my office, attaching photos of the cracked screen and the receipt for the replacement I'd already bought. 2 weeks later, a check for $800 showed up, and I endorsed it straight over to the scholarship fund since I'd already replaced the phone myself. My first therapy appointment happened on a Tuesday morning, and the therapist's office had these big windows overlooking downtown. She asked me to describe not just the assault, but my whole relationship with school and authority figures going back to when I first started feeling like I didn't fit in. We spent that first session establishing that I'd need ongoing weekly appointments to work through everything, not just the recent incident, but years of feeling like an outsider in traditional education. She gave me homework to write down which hometown events I actually wanted to attend, versus which ones I felt obligated to show up for. My sister called me that night to say she'd gotten switched out of the English class with the teacher who cut my hair. The school counselor had handled it immediately without asking any questions or requiring explanations, just moved her to a different section that actually had a better teacher anyway. She said some kids in her new class treated her differently now, asking her about what really happened at the ceremony, and calling her brave for standing up to the teachers. Helena's email arrived with a PDF attachment of the new district conduct policy that specifically banned any physical contact between staff and visitors, except in cases of immediate safety threats. The policy required all staff to complete de-escalation training by the end of the semester and established clear consequences for violations, including immediate suspension pending investigation. She thanked me in the email for pushing for changes that would protect future visitors, instead of just seeking personal revenge. The scholarship announcement ceremony happened on a Thursday evening in the same gym where everything had gone down months earlier. I sat in the back row wearing a baseball cap and keeping my head down while they described the scholarship's purpose of supporting students who found success through unconventional paths. A few parents recognized me and came over afterward to shake my hand and thank me for creating something positive from such an awful situation. The history teacher who'd poured punch on me was supposedly scheduled to present an award, but never showed up. My sister found me after the ceremony ended, and we sat in her car in the parking lot for 20 minutes just talking. She told me she was proud of how I'd handled everything with strategy and planning instead of just trying to get revenge or destroy their careers. We both knew the justice wasn't perfect since the teachers still had their jobs, but we were closer now than we'd been in years. She said she'd been telling people her sister was a CEO, whether I wanted her to or not, because she was tired of people assuming I was some kind of failure. 6 months passed, and I found myself sitting across from the scholarship's first recipient in a coffee shop near my office. She reminded me so much of myself at that age, brilliant at coding but struggling with traditional homework and standardized tests. She'd already built 3 apps on her own and had ideas for a startup, but her parents wanted her to focus on getting her grades up for college applications. I told her about my journey and how dropping out had been right for me but might not be right for her, that there were multiple paths to success. My company had grown to 35 employees by then, and we'd just signed our biggest client yet, a Fortune 500 company that wanted us to rebuild their entire mobile presence. The relationship with my sister had never been stronger, and she'd started introducing me to her friends as her CEO sister, who stood up to the whole school system. Those teachers had tried to humiliate me and destroy my confidence, but instead they'd given me the chance to create real change in the district. The new policies were already being used to protect other visitors from harassment, and the scholarship would help kids like me for years to come. Every time I drove past the high school, I remembered that awful day, but also everything good that came from standing up for myself and using my resources to make sure it couldn't happen to anyone else. Thanks for letting me wonder through all this with you. Definitely been quite a journey to share together. Really appreciate you being here. If you made it to the end, drop a comment. I love reading all your comments.